Hello, women of welcome. I am Sarah Casada, and I am eagerly and excitedly awaiting for Bri. She and I are going to talk a little bit today about our trip to the border that, hard to believe, was a month ago. I can't even believe it. Oh, here she is now. Let me see if I can do this right. Seems like it should have happened. Yes. Second.
Friend.
1.5 tries. I got it.
Oh, man.
Welcome. And welcome to you guys that are viewing live or if you're watching the replay. Bri, I was just telling them that it's been ridiculous that almost a month has gone by from our trip. But as you and I have talked, it takes a while to digest a lot of the experiences and the stories that we hear. And so you all were so faithful and wonderful to walk along with us as we went on that trip, sharing encouragement and questions here on Instagram and also on Facebook. And so we wanted to share with you a little bit about kind of our takeaways from that experience. And so,
yeah, here we go.
Here we go. And now we will do that.
Well,
it's harder than it sounds.
Well, I mean, I think inevitably when you go on trips down to the border or you go to learn in places that are complex and messy, you come back not really knowing how to explain what you saw or how you're feeling. And so it does take a little while to process, and that shouldn't intimidate you from going to those places.
Yeah.
It just to me, what's encouraging is it means that the Holy Spirit is growing something in me. It's doing something, and there's work that's happening. And I think when you come back from trips like this, it's not the work will happen in your heart. It's like you can't stop it from happening because you can't unsee what you have seen. And it's not like we saw anything super traumatic or anything that neither one of us hadn't seen before going on trips. But when you sit with mothers like we sat with in tents, and there's nothing you can offer them. There's nothing that you can offer them other than your prayers, which and we'll get into this, but I get, like when we were there, I told Sarah, we went into Reynosa. We went to two different places. We went to El Paso and Juarez, and then we went over, and we were with a Bar of Frontiers, of our ministries. And then we flew over and met with Border Perspectives with Jonathan, who is wonderful. And both of those immersion trip experiences we would highly recommend. When we went over to McAllen and went into Reynosa, where there was a lot of tent camps, which is near the Matamoros camp, I remember, we encountered these women in these tents, and we were asking some of these families, where they were from, just really kind of some basic information, because showing up to a place of pain and then asking someone to recall their journey or something like that is the most, like, hey, you don't know me, and I'm a stranger, and I just walking into your place of pain, I'm going to ask you your most traumatic story. It's just really missing it in so many ways, and can cause way more pain. And so showing up and asking some very simple questions and then gauging the situation and people want to pray. Sarah and I sat down in this tent with these 4 mothers, and I just remember when we left, I said to Sarah, I was having a hard time praying, because what I realized in that moment is what I would normally pray didn't seem to fit where we were. Like, what I was praying for, was that going to be true for them? When they were needing protection, they were afraid to leave their tents because the cartels were nearby, and they didn't want their kids to get kidnapped, and they didn't want to be taken advantage of, and that they were just waiting with bated breath by their phones to see if their number would be called, or if they could come back up to the gate or whatever. And I just remember struggling in that moment. I've been praying my whole life. You know, we both grew up in church our whole lives. And just to be able to sit in a place and not know what to pray out of fear of, is this still going to be true? You know, when I pray for protect, and this is the reality for so many people who are working in hard spaces internationally and whatnot. But I just remember thinking, like, I don't have anything to offer myself, which is usually like, I'm a doer. Like, okay, if something's wrong, I'm just going to do something. Like, I will go buy you the meal. I will go make the meal. You probably don't want a meal that I'm going to make, but I will go buy you the meal. I will go pick up your kid. I will sit in the ER room. Like, I'm a doer. And so there was nothing I could do in that moment for them. I don't know. How are you feeling when we went there?
Yeah, you know, we talk all the time about how one of the most common questions in this community is, what can I do? And I think that's so ingrained in us. And when you're in that moment, it's not the right question, because kind of what you said is there was nothing we can do for the people that in that situation were right in front of us in that moment. But thinking about, as you were talking about how to pray in these places, what came to my mind was, and I would like to attribute it, but I don't know kind of where it came from. But this idea that it's not really good news unless it's good news for everyone. And I think that is being in places that are very outside of our own familiar zones really bring, I think, the gospel into relief of, like, what does it mean for our faith in this context? What have I maybe assumed was my faith, but is actually my social location and my cultural context? What does protection look like in this environment? What does provision look like when things feel so strangled, in the sense of not being delivered to people that are seeking that safety and provision and protection? That time of prayer that we spent in the tent, I mean, it was, this is a little bit of a side note, but I had an experience many, many years ago, living in a community that was very disenfranchised, very poor. And I remember I was very young, and I was being very dramatic about what college I was going to go to. And it was such an awkward conversation to have with someone in my community who had never been to college and different things. And I remember someone saying to me, it is not a surprise to this woman that you are going to college, and, like, to try to pretend that you're someone that you're not doesn't do dignity to that relationship. And so I also felt like while we were in that tent, there was such a, just, I don't know if awkwardness is the right word, but just recognition of it. We were in very different places, and the pain and tension that comes with that proximity, that it's like you kind of want to wriggle out of it, but there was such beauty in connection, in that we were both mothers. We were all mothers. We were all in that place in that moment. And the faith, I mean, as we were, I guess I'm going to give myself away here. I had my eyes open while we were praying, and the women that we were with were praying fervently with us and speaking words the whole entire time we were praying. And I was just blown away. I was just really like, this is a holy moment in this unexpected place. And I don't know what to do with it. And I definitely cannot nor know how to fix it, but I can be present in this moment. And that's, presence and my prayers are kind of all I have to give in that moment.
Well, it was like, we usually, just as, the Western church, we have this idea that we're going to bring God to these hard spaces. We're going to go on this mission trip and we're going to bring God to these people. We're going to go and do this. And really, when you go into those places, what you start to realize is that God is already there.
Yeah.
It's just a harder dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It's like her prayer for protection is going to look very different than my prayer for protection, but we're both trusting God for protection. Mm-hmm. I was praying and my eyes were closed, but what made me open my eyes were closed. So that's not a dig on Sarah, but I opened my eyes because I could hear the tears on the dirt. And to hear a tear means that that's a weighty tear. That's a heavy tear. But this was like matted down dirt. And, you know, a couple of the women just got on their knees. And, you know, we asked, could we pray for you? And they said yes. And then some of them immediately got on their knees. And then as I was praying, I could hear just the drops. And to me, it was just, the atmosphere was of hopelessness and hope all mixed together in the same. Like, they were trusting God for their absolute livelihood and the livelihood of their kids. And they had nothing, you know, and they had nothing to offer but their faith that God was going to take care of them. And it made me just, to be perfectly honest, coming just really from a conservative lifestyle background, theology, all of it, you know, there's a lot of just narratives out there about people wanting to come and take advantage and come and take. And these are all just a bunch of poor people. And do we want just a bunch of poor people coming into our country and who aren't going to be able to do this A, B, C, D, or E or whatever? And I was like really wrestling with that in my conservative grid that I had. Was like, okay, how many verses does Jesus talk about our care for the poor? He was so concerned about the poor. And it feels like a lot of the narratives we hear are, these are people that are so poor that they're just coming to take. And yet the Lord was not afraid of them taking. Please don't read into that more than there is. It's just the Lord wasn't afraid of that. He knew they were in need. That's why he highlighted them so much. And it's why he kept trying to chisel away the hardness of people's hearts toward them. They're in need, and you are to meet the need. And I think that's such a different shift from the American mantras we hear of just work hard, get it done, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing, and you can succeed no matter what you do. Well, in some places, how could she succeed? You know, if she fled from Honduras or some of the countries, what does success look like for her? She's working hard to try and have a new life, a better opportunity. And it was really shifting to me as far as what is really true and what can we really do, and what are they really trying to do? What are they really trying to do? You know, and in that moment, these women were trying to survive, and they were looking to one of the most powerful nations in the world to give them a chance. And I think there was a lot of grief in that tent too, because I think while we didn't ask their stories, it wasn't appropriate time to hear that or ask that. A lot of these folks that are coming, that we have compassion for, they're not going to qualify. And the reality is that the U.S. can't take everybody, and not everybody should be here. And not all asylum claims that are given are going to be approved, because as devastating as poverty is, that is not a qualification for asylum in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So what does it look like to even just grieve the knowledge that you're sitting with this woman who probably doesn't have a chance, even though she's trying as hard as she is, not to evade, but to have a chance.
Yeah.
That felt really heavy.
It was. And I think I was surprised several people that we met with have said, I'm working with this organization, or this, you know, I've got my name in this list. I'm waiting to hear back from this person. And, you know, I think over the last however many months now of pandemic life, and knowing how much I have struggled in the waiting and the not knowing of what, you know, I'm a planner. And so if you can't tell me what I'm going to be doing 3 months from now or 3 weeks from now, that's like very disorienting. And I think my just sort of empathy of that really grew in watching, you know, people who are literally just waiting day by day to see if someone returns their call. You know, if like you said, if their number is called and whatnot. And there's such a, you know, we talk about this sometimes of our immigration system is really complicated. And so a lot of what we do at Women of Welcome is try to peel back the layers and understand some of the nuances and intricacies. But it's also often very complicated or unknown for people who are trying to walk through it, trying to figure out what that process is, what they're supposed to be doing, when to do that. And I think you kind of see, I feel like we saw some of that even in the camp setting, of people that are like, I'm just waiting to hear what I do next.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the question always does come up. All right, so we see these hard things. We have compassion for these spaces. We want to try and get close. What can we do? And we've always just been super honest with people. It's like, there are things you can do, but there's rarely ever in these human dignity spaces going to be a silver bullet that you're going to be able to just write a check and it's going to solve the problem. You're going to be able to show up to an event and become knowledgeable about all the ways and all the things that need to be done. And I think that's hard because people drop off after they hear that. It's like, no, just tell me what I'm supposed to do. Like, where's the Amazon list? What is the place I'm supposed to donate to? And if you don't give them that right away, they can easily just drop off and say, well, that's going to take some commitment, or that's going to take some time. And what we have seen is that this issue is actually so much closer to home than most people perceive. I mean, you and I, we should talk about this, but you and I both on our flights home.
Yep.
Both of our flights home were full of asylum seekers that were going to sponsor families. They had ankle monitors on their legs, and they had packets of papers that they were supposed to follow. And they were literally wandering into the country without any means. I mean, they are not getting assistance from the government. They don't qualify for that. They're completely dependent on their sponsor family or a sponsor church. And yet here they are, and we're monitoring them, but they're, while they're here and their court cases happening. But as you and I were just talking, it's like these people were on our flights and they were going to the places that we were going to. They were going throughout the country.
That for me was probably one of the biggest, just really zeroed in for me, I think, on the whole experience, ironically, was the flight home. Because, and you and I both had this experience where we were helping translate for people. I was seated next to an asylum seeking mother and her very small child on the airplane, and was trying to help her understand just very basic things about airplane travel. She's asking me, how much do the drinks cost as they're coming by, and trying to help her find her connection in the terminal, and realizing maybe you don't know what the word terminal, even in Spanish, because maybe you've never flown before, and trying to help navigate that. I think for better or for worse, there is a lot of attention on the border, and I think it can be easy, perhaps dangerous, though, for us to see this as an issue that is far off, and whether that's like it's out of sight, out of mind, or it's like, well, it's so far off, I can't get involved. Whichever kind of way you're coming from, maybe for that, like there's still this maybe false sense that this is an issue that has no connection to you personally. And I think as I was on the flight, recognizing that people were going to sponsor families throughout the United States. And I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but I think it's around, I know it's 80% of unaccompanied minors have family in the U.S. And I think it's about 90% of asylum seekers overall, that they're typically going to families that already live here, which is such a reminder to me that as we talk about welcome, as we talk about making space for immigrant, that doesn't always mean looking to the border and how do we engage in that space. That is one space to engage, and it's an important one. But it's also looking around in our communities and saying, God, who do you have in my path that I can serve, that I can love, that I can welcome? That is really the opportunity as women of welcome that awaits us, is saying, Lord, show me how you want me to engage not only this quote unquote issue, but also the real life people that are in my church, in my kids' school, in my community. How can I open my eyes so that I can see where you would have me to engage?
Because while we all want to do something to fix the problem, I mean, truly the whole, there, it's so much more than just immigration reform, but immigration reform is a very, very large chunk of that. And what you see is that there are people stuck in that system that need to be loved as Christ would love them, and to be seen as Christ would see them, not as a poor migrant that is here to take or to, yeah, I'll just leave it as that. As not as a poor migrant that is here to take, but as an image bearer, as someone that God has loved, that he loves, that he has chosen, that he sees, that he has put his image in. And so while we might want to focus on fixing the like systems and the processes and things, which we very much should, we should also be concerned about the people that are stuck within that. And what that means is you might have to get out of your busy circle, your safe circle, to find people who are in that system, because they're not necessarily going to show up on your doorstep. Although, funny story is I was dealing with a death of a family member who was living with us at the time, my grandfather. And I just come back from the border. My grandfather was dying in my home. And I was just feeling super overwhelmed just about, I was having family come in to say last goodbyes and things like that. And I just didn't have capacity to clean my house. So I decided to hire a cleaning lady I'd used, like 6 months ago or whatever. And she came. A lot of my other friends utilized this team, and they're wonderful women. And one of the women that showed up, she was an asylum seeker. She was new. I'd never seen her before. And she was an asylum seeker that had crossed over in Reynosa. And I had just come from there, 5 days ago. And so she was from Honduras. She came with her 4-year-old and her husband, and she told me that she and her husband turned themselves into Border Patrol at the crossing in Reynosa, and they didn't know what to expect, but they had family here, and that they were fleeing the violence in Honduras. I don't know if that means they'll get to stay. I asked her when her court date was, and she was like, "It's not for another year." And I was like, "Wow." And it was just this. It was just kind of like wow. It is around you, and it's not. It might not be that close where you have someone come to your home to help you, and it's that close. But I mean, it is in your community. I promise you, it is in your community. You'll just have to choose proximity in your own community to love on people and to welcome people who are trapped in a system that you and we all wish that we could fix like this, or by writing a check, or by doing something like that. And I think this just lends itself to the new study we just put out, 5-week study, Christ-like Welcome. There are going to be 50 to, I think it's 60 or 80,000 Afghan families that are going to be, they're on military bases right now. They've settled, I think it's probably 500 families, I think right now is the stat. And over the next 6 months, they're going to be settling upwards of 80,000 Afghan families, getting them off those military bases after they've been vetted and after they have been gone through all the rigors that we have for them before they get placed in American communities. And so what does it look like to reach out and say, I'm going to welcome these families, even though I don't understand everything. I'm going to welcome like Christ does. And hopefully the study equips you to revisit scripture in order to be able to do that well.
Yes. And just so you know, if you haven't downloaded it yet, the link is in our bio, and we'll put it in the comments on Facebook so that you can participate in that study. It's got some great contributions from different women, authors and leaders who have lent their voice and helped us to really think about where are the examples in Jesus's life of Christ-like welcome, and how can we reflect on our own lives and emulate that. So thank you guys for watching and for entering into this journey with us. 2 years ago now, we took a group of women from the Women of Welcome community, and I if it wasn't a logistical nightmare, I would love it if we could go with everyone in our Women of Welcome community, because it's just so, it's such a great time to connect as women, but because there is such a holy and sacred experience of being present in places that we are talking about and learning about so often. But it is such an encouragement and a reminder that our communities are also a place where we can learn and practice welcome. And so we hope you will join us for this study, but then also ask God where in your community you can reach out and show welcome. We will talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye, all.